Hi, this is Brendan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock Blog, and I'm here with Joel and Adam for another episode of Horror Express. And today we're talking about Jeffrey Dahmer's favorite movie, The Exorcist III. The Exorcist III is it's basically a proper sequel to The Exorcist. The Exorcist II is not generally that well liked, and it wasn't made by Blatty, and this is actually based on a book that he wrote. And the essential premise, and you guys can correct me if you feel this is not a good way to present it, but it's basically about a guy named Bill Kinderman, who's a cop played by George C. Scott, who was a character in the first movie, who discovers that Damon Karras, the priest from the first movie, is possessed by the spirit of a deceased serial killer. And this movie is a little bit more of a thriller than the first film. The first film is a very is very much focused on the exorcism aspect and on the demonic aspect, and there is supernatural stuff for sure in this one, but it kind of has more of a thriller police procedural vibe. I don't know, would you guys say that's accurate, or would you add any details to the mix?
I think that's fair.
Yeah, it's accurate. Sure. What was that thing about Jeffrey Dahmer again?
Oh, it's his favorite movie.
I feel like we glossed over that. How did you figure that out?
I don't know. I just looked up fun facts about.
You just looked up
Exorcist
Jeffrey
3.
Dahmer's favorite movie, and it popped up.
No, I was looking up information about Exorcist 3. I had never heard it before today, so it's not like I knew this before I looked it up. But apparently, it was his favorite movie, and I thought that was worth pointing out at the start of the show.
There's a factoid that'll haunt my nightmares.
I feel like you want to lead with that so that people know going in. You know what I mean? Like, if that's going to make you uncomfortable about liking the movie, you should know. You know?
You got my attention.
Well, that was the other thing. I figured it would be an attention-grabbing way to open up.
They don't put that on the box, man.
I don't think they want to do that. I think they want to do it by proxy rather than put it on the box. You know, like.
I just want like a picture of him with like a long, like micro-typed review on the back of every box of Exorcist III and DVD.
I mean, we can get into that later. I'm sure there's all kinds of questions people have about why it's his favorite movie and everything.
Yeah, I want to find the exact pull quote that he has too. What is his quote about this?
Yeah,
movie?
because all I got was his favorite movie. There could have been a lot more in the actual quote that would really, illuminate it. But
it's a shame he's gone and we can't get him on the podcast to discuss the movie.
I would not want him on the podcast.
I don't think shame is the verb I'd use. Anyway.
So. Yeah, I'm with Joel.
Well.
But
So Jeffrey Dahmer has good taste in movies. This was really scary.
What did you guys think of this movie? What was your reaction to it? And when was this your first time seeing it?
I got to tell you, I never thought I'd agree with Jeffrey Dahmer on something, but yeah, this is a really good movie. I wouldn't put it in my favorites, not by a long shot, but like I'd definitely make it comparable to the first Exorcist, which is a true classic. It's scary when it needs to be scary. There's a lot of scares here that I don't know if they were pioneered by this movie, but they certainly feel like this movie introduces them. Like it's the first time that any kind of scare like this has ever happened before. Like a lot of movies kind of feel derivative when they do certain kinds of scares. There's a lot of long, like drawn out sequences where this is like, where is this scene going? And then like it'll just end with a super abrupt, out of nowhere left wing like scare. So like those were, and there was a few of those, and there's a lot of let's describe how this guy died without showing you anything directly, which was really unsettling. So this movie gets under your skin, man. It's got a lot of creative and awful ways that it kills people off camera. And it shows you just enough to keep you like really invested, like a true crime drama. So I liked this movie. It's quite a ride. It actually it sticks with you. I don't want to say it haunts you, but it kind of haunts you after you're done with it.
Yeah, as far as the descriptions go, like you say, the descriptions. I think that's the point where Blatty being a novelist pays off, because he's someone that can just write. He just write a good description here of what happens, and you're like, whoa. Because it's surprising how much you do not see in this movie when you actually think about it afterwards. It's like,
but you feel like you saw it, right? You feel as if you did see it.
Yeah, it's impressive. But yeah, I really like this movie as well. Like I said, same thing. It's not my favorite movie, definitely, but it was very thoughtful. It works really well as procedural during the early
Yeah.
part of the movie. It it's very interesting as far as being a philosophical religious discussion in places. It fits with the first movie very well. I mean, I'll get into this later. There's some parts where I could really feel where the studio meddling in this
Yeah.
movie was,
Mm.
but at the same time, the movie's vision was good enough that I really didn't care. I'm like, okay, I can kind of disregard this little annoying
Hmm.
little bit here because I can see what he's trying to do, and so it doesn't really matter. So I thought the movie worked despite its problems. It's I mean it's got a really nice sense of reality to it too. I mean the conversations it's slow in a good way where
Yeah.
you kind of get these real conversations between people. Joel brought up the just having a still camera looking at a scene and it's not telling you where to look. You don't know where the horror is
Yeah.
going to come
That
from.
that's what's so effective about that is that it's still and you're not sure where you're supposed to be looking for it, and it makes you more active in the scene. You know.
Uh-huh. You're like,
Um,
is it is it going to come behind the
yeah.
counter? Is it going to come out of that door? Is it going to come out of this door? Ooh, there's that curtain over there. What's going to happen? And yeah, and it is an effective technique in this movie, no question.
Well, and
Yeah.
it's a jump scare, right? But it's like this would be the movie that I would rebut the jump scares are lazy argument with. I'd be like,
Yeah,
you need to look at how
yeah.
artful and well crafted
Well,
these scares are and tell me that jump scares are lazy.
well, no,
Like, no way.
that's why I don't like a lot of modern movies. Not because they have jump scares, but because the jump scares that a lot of them have are lazy jump scares. We've gotten used to very technologically driven jump scares that rely on CG or rely on audio sounds that do certain things. And
They usually
this,
involve quick cuts too,
yeah,
like not this, because it is that the longer a cut goes, there's just that building tension, that is lost with a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
modern editing.
this is sort of more Tarantino's. Not that Tarantino does horror, but just more Tarantino in that it is building to something and you don't know what it is,
Hmm.
but you know it's something, and and it still somehow manages to take you by surprise because it comes at this angle rather than that angle, like Joel was saying. And so
Yeah.
I think like the big one that we've all been kind of talking around, I think, is that scene where the nurse is at her station.
Yeah.
That is the
Yes.
scene. That scene is so scary. That is
Oh my God.
and there's other scenes like that, but that's the one that really kind of stands out. There's also scenes that are kind of like there's a scene that reminds me a little bit of the box scene from Seven, where when he realizes that his family is in danger. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And but it's done in a much more grounded sort of way, and it just I don't know this movie's just legitimately scary, and it achieves it, I think, like you're saying, through very effective, well constructed jump scare scenes that are planned appropriately. It does it, I think, through performances of a lot of the like there like a lot. We'll get into it more later, but some of the stuff that's scary here is actually about the performances that some of the actors give as well. But also, I just think by just taking its time and kind of building
Oh
and
yeah.
and hitting you at the right moment.
This
But
movie is so patient.
it's very
Hmm.
patient. I saw this. My first time seeing it was when I worked at a video store, and it had just come out on video, and I had seen a Siskel and Ebert review of it, and I think Ebert had said the big thing that I remember him saying was it was a clever idea to use the priest from the first movie, and that really intrigued me, and I wanted to know how he was involved in the story, and so I remember watching it, and it just I think it's a film where I remember seeing it and realizing this is a really good movie, and it's been sort of disappointing to see that it's not. Now it's starting to get its due, but for many years it was just kind of a C-rated film, I think, for most people. Um,
Yeah. It came out right around the time I graduated from high school, actually, which is why I was so kind of preoccupied with other stuff that I just completely ignored this movie when it came out.
Yeah.
So I am guilty of that.
I mean, it kind of
But
redeems the franchise in a way. You know what I mean?
Oh
It's
yeah.
like,
oh, very much.
yeah,
It's a totally fair sequel to the original. I mean, like in the original being a classic, but it's not, I'd have to, I've only read the original book actually, so I can't compare that. But I think part of what makes this movie so scary actually is just that all the characters are completely real and grounded. And so like, when Father Dyer, for example, it's like, it's not just scary what happens. It's like, oh man, he's gone now. It's just that character's so interesting. Having
yeah.
him disappear from the movie is tragic.
Well, and it's also it's more than tragic too, because it isolates Kinderman more.
Yes.
Because like and I looked at the time signature. I think he dies around the 26-minute mark or the 29-minute mark, one of the two. That's not that far into the movie.
That's surprising,
yeah.
actually. I would have guessed it was later.
Yeah, I
in
would
the
have put it
movie.
like way like closer to 45 or an hour because he feels like he's in the whole movie until like he's suddenly not.
Yeah, well, I
Yeah.
think they just do a really good job of building that relationship, and I think another thing about the film, and I want to say before we start too, Red Letter Media has a really, really good re-review
Oh yeah,
of this
they do.
movie.
Okay.
I watched it a few years ago when it first came out, and I thought it was a great one. And I rewatched it right before doing this because I didn't want to repeat anything subconsciously that they did.
Mhm.
I'm probably still going to repeat points that they made because they were also good. So I just want to give them credit. And there's one point I want to talk about in particular that they bring up that I think is
sure.
worth mentioning. But people should watch that because it's a really good sort of coverage of this topic.
Well, even in general, Red Letter Media is pretty great. So
Yeah, I like their stuff, but this was one I felt like it definitely warranted being mentioned. But I think that and this is something that they do talk about is the dialogue, and I think the dialogue is a really big reason why that relationship
Mhm.
is able to build the way it is, and I think that it's also kind of like Adam, like you were saying, like he's a writer and he's
Yeah.
the director of the movie, and he's given a normal director might with a few exceptions might not be as willing to have that much dialogue in a movie. And the dialogue's nice. It's really well crafted. It
is.
It's
Rich
funny.
dialogue.
It's got humor, right? Like there's a lot
Yeah.
of humor in it,
Yes,
but the
it's
humor
very-
fits.
It does. It fits, and like it's very human. Like the
Mhm.
struggle that our detective protagonist is going through it's very like you can feel it along with him. Like it really
Yeah.
resonates. If you ever had a lot of trouble in your life and you find yourself questioning the purpose of it, then like, yeah, it's a very modern kind of malaise he finds himself in. And one of the things I love, because we mentioned like that his priest friend dies like startlingly, like right at this point in the movie, and like they have this wonderful chemistry where they're kind of like going back and forth on this dilemma with two different views, and then suddenly that one view is just vanished, and he's really adrift, and like you kind of feel adrift with him as an audience. So like,
Yeah.
man, it's
Well,
brilliant.
because
It's
part
really
of it
brilliant.
is loss of faith is part of the story, and that's obviously, really full. Like he's already kind of lost, like the restaurant scene where they're kind of debating, God and all of the evils in the world and everything. And it's kind of seems like he has the more effective argument in that conversation, but then to have the priest actually vanish, it just totally removes I think any sense of faith that the character would have. By the way, did you guys catch the Larry King cameo in that scene?
No, that one flew under my radar.
And this was a Red Letter Media thing. The Larry King was one of the customers at the table, and I believe the old Surgeon General might have actually been another diner in the restaurant as well that got a little. And it's weird because it's like there's no it's if somebody hadn't pointed these things out, I would have never noticed them.
Yeah,
I saw Patrick Ewing and Fabio. Samuel L. Jackson's in the movie too, but I didn't actually notice him.
Yeah, Fabio, the Archangel Fabio. Was that the?
Yeah.
Okay, he's kind of hard to
miss.
What
I wanted to know is, because I remember Fabio being a big thing in the '90s. Was this before Fabio was like a trending thing, or after?
Fabio was already a huge thing. That was deliberate. I mean, basically, it is kind of just showing you that, giving it that weird dream vibe. But it's like, what's Fabio doing here? Yeah, it wasn't like he was just some anonymous model at the time.
Okay,
they're definitely. Yeah, I thought I was something else. I'll bring out the movie. I thought all the dream sequences in this movie
they were
had
great.
A great tone to them.
Yeah.
Well, I rarely compare a dream sequence to the directorial style of Terry Gilliam, because that guy's like the king of like subconscious sort of dream sequences. But yeah, I got real Brazil vibes from that.
Well, yeah, I would agree with that. And I also hold Brazil in very high esteem. So it's
well, and that particular dream sequence was good because it the tone was just off enough that you're like, something's not quite right here, or he's like, hi Thomas, how are you? I'm sorry you're dead. It's just, it's just like a weird, like, not the way that you would have this conversation. And then he sees Father Dyer, and he's like, oh, I wonder if we're both having this dream. And he's like, nope, we're not both having this dream. And then the viewer's kind of like, oh, that's a bad sign. So it foreshadows nicely what unfolds, because that's before the priest
You've already
dies.
had the decapitated statue shot at that point too, and you're
yes,
like, the decap statue, like, oh no, he's in real trouble. And then you had that dream, and you're like, oh, he may be in more than trouble. Okay, but yeah, it's a nice progression there from scene to scene.
Now,
it's a really good job. It does such a great job of putting us in the head of our protagonist too, like experiencing a dream with the protagonist. That's a brilliant way of doing it, and the cuts are like, they feel like when you're going to sleep and waking up. It's really gorgeously put together.
Yeah, it's that transition is a really tough thing to pull off, and not many movies actually do that well.
Now, what did you guys think of the premise of having Damon Karras, who died at the end of the first movie, getting possessed by the Gemini killer, and 15 years later, he sort of reconstitutes himself, and he begins this crime spree, but he's able to do it by inhabiting other people's bodies and like basically entering into catatonic patients and using them as vessels for his crimes.
There was a movie that did something like this too. It's kind of the same thing where you had like a body hopping villain. What was that?
I can't. I'm not.
I'm kind of vaguely recalling a few movies, but I can't think of the title of any of them.
It's gonna drive me crazy. Because I remember someone recommending to me that movie, and I was like, yeah, maybe later. I don't know. Body hopping villains are one of those kind of bad guy things where like they almost feel too scary. Like if that was real, like we just don't have any way to fight it. So that's really frightening. But it's also kind of bullshit, It's like, oh, you can just hop into their body, you lazy piece of crap.
See, this movie works. I agree with you. Usually that does kind of put me off a little bit, because I'm like, whatever. I mean, they're going to have to come up with some weird MacGuffin to defeat him and blah, blah, blah. But this movie was about the futility of it. So it worked, because it was like just leaning into, this is really hopeless.
Well, and also there were clear rules at work here too, where he was body hopping, but he has a body that is his base that he has to hop back into, right? So if you kill that body, it's over. That presumably. So I think that saved it from being one of these things where it's like the movie ends with like the nurse smiling funny at the camera, and it's like, the Gemini killer continue. So I think it worked for that reason. Also, it's just a different premise than the original movie, but it's tied to the old premise, where it's kind of like, this is vengeance for what happened, but
this is events that just come from the other movie, not let's do another exorcism again.
Yeah, though there is an
exorcist
exorcist.
Girl who's I know. Well, I say it's not just that. That's what I'm saying. But
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Once again, the only reason an exorcism was in the movie was because of studio
Yes.
mandated reshoots,
Yeah.
and I think it's largely irrelevant to everything that matters in the
Now,
movie.
so let's talk about that. Let's talk about
Yeah.
the studio involvement and the fact that you do have an exit now. You have this white-haired guy who's I forget his name. Was it Father Morning? Was that it? Was it?
That sounds right to me.
He kind of he's got a stark look. They give us a little bit of his background, but at no point does he ever interact with George C. Scott's character. There's no reason that we're aware of for him showing up at the end when he does, very dramatically.
Every other character in the movie is really grounded, interacts with other people.
Yeah.
You're like, this is a human being. I believe. Whereas he is just this movie demon hunter.
Yeah.
It's just.
but here's what's funny. They talked about this on Red Letter Media. One of the guys was like, for ages, I've always wanted to see the director's version of the movie. I've heard about it, and I guess I don't know. I haven't seen the director's cut. But apparently there is a version of it that's now available somewhere. And he saw it, and he said, but it's just George C. Scott walking up and shooting him, and it totally loses any of the...
there's no climax to it.
I would disagree. Okay, here's why the whole bringing that other exorcist in and having all the dramatic exorcist thing, it changed the ending, because the ending is about, will he commit murder? Will the demon trick him be able to tempt him into murdering this person and damning himself? Or, basically that's kind of what the trap is.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, will he shoot should be the climax. But instead, by having this whole action with all the exorcism and everything, because, hey, the exorcist has created an opening. Now you can shoot, because he's created this opening. So it changes it to an action movie ending rather than it being a dramatic conflict ending.
I understand that.
That's kind of.
But what I'm saying is, what this guy was saying is, when he actually saw the cut, it just landed flat. Like he had imagined it, like you're saying. But then when he saw the director's cut, it just...
Here's the thing. The director's cut that is out there that was released a few years ago, that most of the footage was lost.
Okay.
It's not actually the original version.
Okay.
It's just, it's like done from video dailies and all this other stuff. So it's like, it's not what the movie originally would have looked like necessarily. It's just an attempt to cobble bits and pieces together that they have.
What I will say is, what you're saying about the trap being, will he commit murder and kind of damn himself, that is a much more intriguing, and it seems more like a more of a Blatty thing. Like he kind of thinks that way, like that's a much more, it's just a much more a religious person would be concerned with that question, or a person who's just concerned about morality in general. I think would be wouldn't just want it to end with shooting Father Karras like that, I suppose. But
I don't know if I agree with the moral premise of that. His friend has been dead for years.
Well, that was what I was going to say.
That has reconstituted his corpse. Like, you're not killing a person here. You're destroying a monster. Like, it's not comparable. I'm sorry.
Well, it's a moral quandary the movie is raising. I mean, you're allowed to have your opinion on it. Is it, or was it murder? Was it not? Like, I mean, I'm not saying it's
here's what I'll say.
Back from the dead. I don't think that's murder anymore.
Well, I know, but I'm saying it's clearly what the demon is trying to get him to do, though, through a lot of the movie. I feel because
arcane reasoning there.
What?
That's some arcane reasoning on the demon's part, which I guess scans, but
yeah,
well, I don't
exactly.
know. Well, so wait, there's two things going. There's the Gemini killer, but there's also, I think it's either Satan or Pazuzu. I don't know which one it's supposed to be, but there is a demonic force that assisted getting the Gemini killer in there that is masterminding all this, and I don't think that the Gemini killer wants him to kill Father Karras, but I could totally see Satan or whatever demonic force is behind this as its revenge, wanting to have Kinderman kill Father Karras.
Yes.
I don't know. I think because this has been the studios did reshoots and edits and threaded it. It's that it's not clear to me that that's there in the final version of the movie that we see. But I think what Adam is saying is before the studio got involved, he thinks that would have been that theme would have more clearly been.
Yeah, because I think I'm saying because the whole Extras thing was added, so I mean it would have been because I haven't seen the director's cut obviously, so I can't say it very likely does fall flat in that cut, but as it wasn't really, it is just a compromised piece, so I feel like there could be a version where it all kind of came together. But my other point is that I saw what they were going for enough that I wasn't actually, I was like, well, this doesn't work, but it doesn't actually bother me because everything around it is so strong that it doesn't actually ruin the movie. So
also, I do think that they did a good job with that stuff. Like
they did.
Yeah, like when the Exorcist enters the scene, it makes no sense because there's only been one reference to, like Kinderman had a conversation with the parish priest about the Exorcist, but he never spoke with the Exorcist himself, so it just feels weird that he shows up. But that entrance is so dramatic, and also
it is well done.
Yeah, and it's perfectly timed because that's what stops the woman that's trying to behead Julia at his house, right? So it's a really cool kind of moment. But also the Exorcist scene is really well. I mean, with the cobras and everything, and the priest getting like his skin ripped off, like all this stuff.
That's got a real El Topo vibe, yeah.
Well, I love Exorcist scenes in general because I like how it's about how much faith does this character really have. That's kind of and also what are they going up against exactly? Is this just some 2-bit demon, or are they about to meet Satan? Like what's the deal here? And you feel and I love the scene where the priest gets stripped of all of his garments, and then he's just got his collar and his black outfit on, and the cross is on the ground, and he's totally vulnerable, and it just is he goes from being this big, dramatic, powerful figure to just this pulp on the ceiling. I thought it was really effective, and it.
No, I mean, in isolation, the scenes are really good, and it's like I feel like if the studio had put their foot down when it was still a screenplay and say, you've got to put an exorcism in here rather than waiting for the movie to have been shot, then saying, hey, go back and reshoot an exorcism and cram it into your movie somehow. I feel like Blatty probably could have made all of that work much better. So it's
noticeable. It's definitely noticeable. The reshoot, especially if you're aware of them, it becomes even more noticeable.
The thematic muddling that Adam has talked about is noticeable even if you're not aware of it, because you're right, there doesn't seem to be any moral dimension to the final scene. I mean, what is the morality of the exorcism? Show up, perform exorcism, shoot your friend. Like there isn't where who stands in judgment of that? It was just righteous and good to have done that. But the movie wants you to ask moral questions. Like the whole thesis of the film is struggling with faith.
There's a few things. I think number one, in a weird way, like Father Damien is sort of redeemed at the end of it, right? Because he's able to resist the possession and allow himself to be killed. I think the other aspect of it is the George C. Scott character Kinderman has this loss of faith throughout the movie that is ironically restored by the Gemini killer in the end, and that's kind of what enables him, I think, to take that final step in the end. Do you know what I mean? Like I think and there's that weird scene where he's like, do you believe? And he's like, I believe in pain.
What was with that?
So I think what he was saying is that he believes that all of this wickedness exists in the world, and I think what he was getting at is if that much evil exists in the world, then Satan is real, and therefore God is real too. I think that's kind of where he was going. I know it's a little bit windy, but I don't think it's that much of a stretch either. I think I mean you have to interpret that scene. I don't think they definitely don't give you a clear roadmap.
Right, that's what I'm talking about, the thematic muddling of the movie. Like, if that had been him denouncing faith to do what he needed to do for the world, like to remove this evil from it, like that's just basically someone choosing to do what is right for the living world versus like what is ultimately right in some kind of cosmic sense. You know, that would make sense then if that's the question the movie was asking. But the question the movie was asking wasn't really answered to the movie, right?
Well, the question the movie was asking is, can God exist in an evil world? Is the problem of evil enough to say that, you know, God doesn't exist? And that's what Kinderman is grappling with the whole film. And so that's why I think when he says, yes, I believe in evil, but then there's kind of this unspoken, and so I believe in God. I feel like that, because there's like this holiness to that scene when he's doing that. And he's also appealing to God.
He basically says he believes in all the bad stuff, which is what he's already believed in the whole movie.
Yeah.
Then he shoots a guy, his best friend, actually.
But again, I think that's
by this act of evil, and it's a really weird scene.
No, but it's a liberating act. He's not. I think what Adam was getting at with the meddling is it's not. It's maybe a little unclear because of how they did things, but I think he's obviously liberating Father Damien, and so
you might read this as a man reclaiming his faith through this incredibly difficult act. And I think that's probably the only reading I can come away with where it has any kind of cohesiveness to me.
I mean, I think that's what it is. I think he's. I mean, I think that it's about, you know, loss and. I mean, because the Gemini killer basically says it explicitly, like, you know, I can solve your problem, your loss of faith or whatever. I don't remember exactly how he phrases it, but he says that, so that's planted there. And in that scene, it's kind of resolved, and it's done against the background of an exorcism, and the shooting seems to have divine sanction because the priest comes back to life for a moment and gives him that window. So it feels like the required ingredient of him having some kind of faith is the piece that needs to enter into that window that he's given. But I don't know. I mean, you know, again, it is. I do think it is kind of a little chaotic at the end, and
like I said, that's another reason why the priest is kind of an issue. The priest opening the window so he could do it is, it's like, well, isn't this about his faith, not this priest who we don't even know's faith? I mean, it's just, that's, you know, I mean, like I said, I could see what they wanted to do, so I was okay with it, but yeah, it's a little frustrating.
Yeah. And there was that there was that line from the exorcism that what is it, like the let your servant thing, you know, like that. Yeah, I forget the exact phrasing.
Save your servant or something like that.
Yeah, it's part of like the second chapter of the exorcism ritual, I think. And so having that book there, you know, it just kind of ties that part to it. So, but I don't know. But my reading of it was, he's basically saying he believes in all this evil, and that somehow gets him to believing in God again. I know, like, and so I'm interpreting that as that's him overcoming the problem of evil, which is the problem that he's grappling with the whole movie. Because they have a whole conversation about it with the priest, and he almost seems to dispel the priest's faith with his argument, right? Like, he's talking to the priest, and they pan over the priest's reaction, and he's just got this hollow look in his eyes, and you can just tell that he's, you know, he doesn't have a response when he says that. I forget what it is. His eyes were impaled with ingots, and he was and he was crucified on a pair of rowing oars. Like, it's really well phrased, but it takes out the stomach of this priest. So I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of that's. I mean, you definitely get a sense of what the author's beliefs are in the movie. I think, even if there is muddling, I think you get a sense of.
That's what redeems the movie, definitely. But I mean, an interesting thing too. I mean, you just reviewed Rosemary's Baby, which is another satanic related movie, and what's interesting is that in Rosemary's Baby, which is a fantastic movie, it's using Satanism as kind of a metaphor, whereas there is no metaphor. This is about God and Satan and what you believe, and there's nothing else this is about. It's like it is a Catholic movie straight through. So it was interesting watching these back to back for that reason.
Yeah, I agree. There's definitely, at the very least, you can say like definitely the belief is behind the movie. There is like
Yeah.
whoever made this believes in Satan and believes in God, and there seems to be a sincere belief there. And if there isn't a sincere belief, there's a sincere grappling with doubt of some kind going on
Yeah.
inside that system of thought. And so, but one interesting point that they made on Red Letter Media that was the one I mentioned earlier. There is kind of a metaphor, which is I forget which guy it was because I don't know their names too well, but one of the guys said that he the reason he liked this movie was because it's not about people but about institutions, and specifically it's about the church, it's about law enforcement and police, and it's about medicine. And so and those are and it's interesting that, and one of the things that you notice when you're watching the movie, one of the things I noticed, which is why I had a positive reaction when he made this comment, is you physically can almost feel the institutions in this film. Like you can almost smell the paint in the hospital. Do you know what I mean? Like
that hospital was too real.
Yeah. It was too, like you feel like you're in a waiting room when you were like 8 years old. Especially since a lot of time has passed, and this is kind of like an old, like this is like a hospital from the 90s.
Oh yeah, they don't make hospitals like that anymore. That's a hospital that you would encounter in the 90s that was built in the 70s.
Yeah.
Whenever Adam got me reading the Day of the Triffids, I think is what it was called.
Yeah.
And when they just started describing the hospital, this is the exact image that popped into my head. A hospital just like this one. And there's a unity of architecture between that and the police precinct and the Catholic churches they go in. There's something about all that architecture. There's something.
There's a discomfort created because I feel like they're capturing a lot of the things that your senses pick up on that make you uncomfortable when you're inside a building like that, because you have to be in a building like that.
Well, they also have the scene too where the nurse wakes the guy up. The whole ice cube scene where the guy's fears gets woken up, and it's like, this movie just brought up so many memories of how much it sucks being in a hospital.
And that scene is brilliant because it also tells us that nurse's name, which is important for knowing when they actually bring up her name, but also for foreshadowing, because we know that he only kills people with K in their name. That slipped my mind during that scene, but good point. And also the doctor's overreaction itself is interesting, but understandable, because you realize, well, a doctor, he's obviously sleeping there because he's got a long shift or something, and for a doctor to not get the right amount of sleep, like when we have a normal job, we worry that we're missing an hour's sleep or somebody woke us up because we're going to be groggy at the computer. This guy could kill somebody because he's, so I thought that, it's just an interesting interaction between those two characters, because you totally understand the nurse's perspective, but you also kind of get why the doctor might be totally flipping out on this lady because of the stakes of sleep for him. And that's the scene that leads into that wonderful jump scare.
Yeah.
It's kind of a false jump scare right before the real one. The movie, there's a lot of points in that where it just completely pulls the rug out from under you. The old lady on the ceiling was one of the ones that got me. It's not like that's even imagery that even at the time I think was unique. It was just, that's the first time in the movie when something so unquestionably supernatural happens, and it's really alarming.
That lady was so charming too. I love the scene where she's like, "Are you the radio repairman?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm the radio repairman." And she's like, "Oh, here it is. Can you see it?" And he's like, "Yes." And she's like, "It's a telephone." And it's just like it was just a really, I don't know. I just thought that was a brilliant maneuver on her part.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the horror of the movie too, is by making that woman kind of sweet and playful in her little way. It's like that's the tool that he is using to commit these horrible murders. Just makes it all the more horrible that he's kind of turning these.
What about
in
the
that scene too? She seems genuinely afraid that the dead are talking to her through her
Yeah.
radio. Oh,
well, they
it's so
probably
eerie.
were.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably what was going
Yeah.
Yeah,
on.
that's
Yeah,
exactly what's
it's like the
happening.
Ouija board in the first movie.
Yeah.
So it's a similar situation to that.
What did you guys think of the Dr. Temple? The guy with the cigarettes who was rehearsing? He's the one who basically connects him with the Gemini killer. And he's got that little note that he's given. It's played by Scott Wilson, who played Abraham in The Walking Dead. That's where people would recognize him from. But he's a lot younger in this in this film. But I don't know. I like that scene where he's just like chain smoking and he's like literally lighting one cigarette with the other one, and he's like putting out the thing, and it takes him forever because he's like obsessive compulsive about putting out the cigarette. I don't know, just something about that scene. It just it puts you on edge. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, George C. Scott's reaction during that too. There's he just does a really good take with his eyes, just like, what is going on with this guy? It's a really well done scene. But that character, I was perplexed during that scene. The way he's got the script he's reading from and stuff, I was like, what's the deal with this script? Because I didn't pick up on the fact that it was, the patient giving it to him. But
the camera really wants you to notice that script too.
Yeah.
So that's a confusing scene when you first encounter it, because you're like, who the fuck is this guy working for? Like, and he's like super nervous too. And like, you don't know, you don't get any closure on that for a long time. So you're like, why is that not actually the guy? Definitely seems like he's supernatural when he goes to talk to the Gemini killer, right? His voice is like in a different place in the audio, so it's way closer to you when you're listening to it in the audience, and it's like he's doing these horrible howls, and you're like, this is definitely an actual possession. Why was that guy on script? What's happening in this movie? So it's great for really putting you off your game as an audience.
Because at first I was like, did he write this because he's being careful about what he said? But then I was like, no, it doesn't seem like you. Because I first thought, before we saw the script, was when he was acting weird. I was like, is he possessed now? Is that where we're going with this?
Yeah, and I think
that
it's
was
trying
my
to
first
swerve
thought.
you that way, because you kind of get the idea that someone is hopping bodies in this movie.
Yeah.
Right? Like they sort of like, there's that voice change in the confessional booth where you're like, okay, something's going on here.
Well, there's the whole multiple fingerprints is what tipped me off. As soon as we got to that second killing and the fingerprints didn't match, I'm like, oh, okay. I picked up at that point the demon was body hopping, but yeah.
That scene takes all of that knowledge and because it's pretty clear that something like that's happening. We're pretty savvy as a modern audience, and then they just sort of throw that curveball, and it's like, well, that guy wasn't possessed. Why would he be working for a possessed person? What the hell is going on here? And it keeps you like off kilter. The whole movie has little ways of putting you off kilter.
Well, and
it's really great.
And they were smart because they direct most of your suspicion at the bitchy nurse. And I'm calling her bitchy because she says herself that she's a bitch, so that's why I'm describing her.
Yeah, self-identified.
That's a free one.
Yeah. But she's an interesting character because they really get you to kind of suspect her. And but at the same time, we've all met nurses that are like that, right? Like, it's a believable
totally
character.
Believable. Yeah. Totally believable.
And you're not even mad at her as a member of the audience because nurses, they have a hard job, dude.
Exactly.
I don't blame you. I get cranky counting money all day.
She's got to deal with these cops coming around their hospital, and she's trying to
really
deal
throwing
with
their weight around.
Man.
Yeah,
I completely understood that character.
What did you guys think of the Gemini killer? I want to talk about how, number one, Jason Miller is playing Father Karras's body, basically. But there are moments where we have another actor, I think his name is Brad Dourif, who me and Adam have discussed him before in the Gethsemane episode of Babylon 5.
The tongue twister.
That's right.
It's the same guy. This is probably why he got that role.
You're right. It's such an obvious reference to Exorcist III now. Oh my God, that's amazing.
But
oh wow.
But
okay.
But so they do this great thing where you have like this haggard Damon Karras speaking, And then at one point he says like the Gemini killer is dead, and then you suddenly see Brad Dourif playing the character, and he's just screaming, "I am not dead! And it's like startling. It is like really effective, and the performance I think is off the rails. Just in terms of, I want to listen. Like this guy's talking about stuff like there are all kinds of little lines that this guy has that are great, but I just want to keep hearing him talk. Like one of his lines was, "Oh, a few boos from the gallery I see," when he gets slapped by George C. Scott. He
is spellbinding, like straight up. Talk about this movie is not hurting for brilliant performances. Like almost every single actor like outdoes themselves in this movie. Like the magnitude of some of these performances. And that one still stands head and shoulders over everything else. It's unbelievable. Yeah. Like, if you see nothing else in this movie, just watch those scenes. They're worth it.
Yeah, I think there's 2 or 3 dialogues between those 2.
Really good ones, yeah. And they're like, oh, God, that howl got me. Like, I was just, because I didn't expect it. And Lovecraft had this right. I'll say this about the man. He once wrote something to the effect of, there are sounds that animals make and sounds that humans make. And when the one makes the sound of the other, it's like horrific.
Yeah.
Yes. And I wasn't ready for it. Because at first he was just like verbalizing, or I thought he was. And I was like, oh, a human sound is going to come out of him. That's what my subconscious brain was telling me. And then it just sustained as this unearthly howl. And I was like, oh, that makes me feel kind of nauseous, actually.
It's the combo of those effects and the good performance together that make that work. Like the intent. This guy is so intense. Like when he's talking
in the room with that dude, like he is sweating, and you're sweating with him.
And just like when he's talking about, like how when he was killed in the electric chair, and he's like, it was very upsetting. I didn't have a body, and there was work to be done, and I had to do more killing, And then he talks about going into, and it's like you're slowly getting all the information about what was going on so that it makes sense. But the way it's presented is just like it's unbelievable. And and he talks about going into Father Karras's body and how the brain is jelly, and it takes him 15 years of maximum effort to get. It's just, I don't know, just those scenes are just great. They're really good. And I think across the board too. I think like George C. Scott is really good. Like I think around the same time he played oh God, what was his name? Customata from in the Mike Tyson HBO movie, right? And it was a good choice for Customata, but it felt like more of a phoned-in performance than this movie does. This movie feels like I don't know, like the scene where he sees his friend that's dead and he lifts up the thing and he kind of winces. He doesn't break out into tears. It's just it's like every scene like that, you just see the hardening of his world and of his, but there's still emotion there.
That scene and the payoff to that scene later on, where he's talking about the Gemini killer to the doctor who's losing his shit because they locked down the hospital, and he just has that moment where he just breaks because it's just too much even for him. I was just like, oh my God.
But it's not. Go ahead, Adam. Go ahead.
Okay, one thing George C. Scott is really good at, he's good at being gruff and sensitive at the exact same time, and that is just that is like it. His gruffness is all this layer of armor he's built up around the fact that he's a very sensitive person, and I mean it just in a number of his roles, and it's just a really good effect.
No, yeah, he's really likable in this movie. Sometimes George C. Scott isn't particularly likable. It's kind of part of his charm. But
he can be. Yeah, he is very, very likable when the role calls for it. I've always thought so.
And so I think he's, and again, this is like kind of a later role for he's older. I think one of the if I had a criticism, it's that he seems a little old for his daughter and his wife.
Yeah,
the age seems.
Too.
Yeah.
I thought it was a bit much, but
I like to think he's almost exactly the right age for it. It's just his job is just that hard.
He's so weathered. I
mean, 31 years old.
but also the he has some great lines in the movie to just like like there's that when he's having the conversation with the priest and he's like he's just like at his wit's end and the priest just says something like it all works out and he's like when and he says at the end of time and he says that's soon just like
we got that line. It's a good one.
Yeah, because the priest is like we're spirits, Bill. Like it's like we're it's not about the flesh, and so. But I just thought like those dialogue exchanges were great. There were a couple of other ones where he talks about he's complaining about God, and he says God is waltzing around the universe like some kind of cosmic Billy Burke. Just like I don't know, just the sound of that line works.
Yeah, the writing in this is great, and. But I'm talking about Father Dyer again. I mean, I think one of the reasons too, it's kind of shocking when he dies early on. It's like the way the movie is structured early on. It feels like, he and Kinderman are going to be working together.
Yes.
They're piecing this together, and it feels like they're the buddies that are going to go through this movie together, and then, boom! It's kind of the Psycho effect where you think in Psycho someone's the main character, and it's like, oh no, they're not.
Yeah, well, especially considering this is called The Exorcist III. It really feels like they're going to be the buddy cop duo that does the exorcism at the end. No, he's toast. He is definitely exsanguinated and decapitated.
Yeah.
Well, and the scene when he's in the hospital, even where he's saying, "Oh, it's not serious," and he says, my brother Eddie had the same symptoms," and he's like, "Your brother Eddie died at age 30," and he's like, "He died in Vietnam." It's just like there's just this humor in every step of the conversation, and then he's like, "But maybe there was some connection still," just the.
Yeah, I mean, if it's one of those movies, if that scene of him visiting him in the hospital, if that had been like a half hour long and written as well as that, it's like, yeah, I totally would have been fine just watching that hospital visit of these two guys talking to each other, because, it was just very entertaining.
But yeah, I know there were just so many. Oh, there was another great line that Father Dyer had, which was Jesus loves you, but everyone else thinks you're an asshole.
And that's him talking to his boss.
Yeah,
it's like, what did you do to our donor?
Well, and he's talking about how he's going to go see It's a Wonderful Life, and he says like he's like, "Do you have a favorite movie?" to the boss, and the boss says The Fly, which apparently the guy who played that character was in The Fly. He had a brief role in
that's awesome.
in The Fly a few years earlier. Really cool.
Cronenberg is going to infect every last one of our episodes somehow, isn't he? He is the tumor from all horror movies, which he would love.
Yeah, he would. But it's this movie has its flaws, but it more than compensates for any flaw it has. This is a very high recommendation from me.
Yeah, same here. I think the complexity of it in general just kind of makes it immune to the sort of linear analysis it might have if it was just like the original moral dilemma. I think making it messy kind of actually enhances it.
Yeah, well, it's a movie that wants to make you think. So the fact that being messy means you have to think. There's nothing here that it's not going to just hand you, this is what you're supposed to think after seeing this movie. So...
Which I think is fitting, given that doubt is such a prevalent part of the film, right?
True.
But yeah, I think it's a really good movie. I think it's a movie that like has been seriously underrated. And I remember when I first saw this, just how I don't know. This was at a time where I was still sort of seeing the horror movies for the first time too. So it was one of these things where I was actively rating movies as I saw them. And I remember watching this one and just really being impressed with it. And again, it just never quite. I don't know. I guess because of the year it came out, and I think when it did come out, it didn't get the best reviews, which I think was a little bit unjust. But I don't know. It's a really good sort of thriller / horror movie, I think. And definitely. You can skip Exorcist II, but definitely watch 1 and 3. Like 1 and 3.
I actually did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen the first one. I love the first one. But I've never seen the second one. So.
Yeah, I watching this, I was like, I really should watch the first. Because I've read the book or the first one. I've never watched the movie. But I'm like,
you've never seen the first Exorcist movie, Adam? Oh man.
No.
Oh, dude, you're in for a treat. This movie rips.
Yeah,
you're
the book is fantastic, and I was like, well, I know the stories, but I'm like, I don't know, just based on watching this, I was like, even though I know everything, I feel like just experiencing the movie now.
It's quite an experience, yes. High recommendation.
Yeah, it's a good movie. It's probably even slower paced than this movie, I would say.
Well, yeah, like I said, I've read the book, which is not a action-packed book, but a lot of it's parties at Washington D.C. with socialites, but
and yeah, there is that, but it's a good movie. The Heretic is bizarre, and
the soundtrack's good. I recommend the soundtrack for Exorcist 2.
I will say this about Exorcist 2. I had a friend in high school who loved it, so I mean, it's not. I think that sometimes what happens is the weight of opinion goes a certain way online on the internet, and it becomes intractable, and a movie gets labeled as X. But before that was the case, there were lots of pockets of people that I'm sure loved the movie, and I had a friend that was really into the film. He actually is responsible for me mispronouncing that word because he used to call it the heretic. The heretic. Mm. And so I always thought it was heretic. And
yeah, well, I saw
ironically in heretical pronunciation. So
yeah, but I saw part of Exorcist 2 back in the early 90s, so I'm pretty sure it wasn't the weight of internet opinion that poisoned me against it. So
okay,
yeah, some movies are just bad, like Sleepwalkers.
Which we're gonna. That was a blow before the bell even rung. That's a little bit.
We're fighting dirty, Davis.
Well, now I know.
It's a street fight, baby.
Now I
think Rocky 4. Rocky 3 didn't end that way.
So this is Rocky 5 rules, is what I'm hearing.
Yep.
But yeah, so we'll see. Is Sleepwalkers next, or do we have another demon movie that we need to do before we get to Sleepwalkers?
I think we have one more pulpy demon movie.
Oh, yeah, that's right. What is it? What is it again, Joel? That we're doing?
Demonic Toys.
Demonic Toys.
Yeah.
Oh, we are going with Demonic.
We're masterminding the Puppet Master versus Demonic Toys for crossover month. I gotta get all the little pieces in the right place.
All right.
So we got our pulpy demon movie, and then
Get ready to be bored a lot. Actually, this is a really fun movie. It's been a while. I was 11 when I first saw it, so we'll see what happens.
I mean, it's a full moon movie, right? So like, there's an expectation you have going in with a full moon.
This is a mark of quality.
It's kind of like if it's a trauma film, there's like what you're getting into. But yeah, so then I guess we'll do that, and then we'll do Sleepwalkers, and then we'll have our big debate, which
showdown.
I'm going to have to insist is not done at like 11 or 10, because I will definitely be at a serious disadvantage.
You guys are so tired. Yeah, this time difference is really messing with all of us. All right.
So anyways, I don't know. Any final thoughts before we head out on this one, or are we good here?
If you are holding off on seeing the Exorcist 3 because you've heard about how bad Exorcist 2 is, skip Exorcist 2, but absolutely do not miss Exorcist 3. It's really, really good. One of the better movies we've reviewed, really. We reviewed some really good ones. Yeah. But this one still is just on the weight of performance and writing and the beauty of the direction, and just it holds together gorgeously. It's really it demands your attention. It's rewarding to watch. Highly recommended this movie.
Yeah, and so if we're doing our final thoughts here, my final thought is that in researching today for the podcast, I was really surprised to find out that William Peter Blatty was the guy that wrote A Shot in the Dark, which is kind of one of the very first Inspector Clouseau movies. So there you go. I would not have associated that, but there you go.
I think he's more versatile than people realize. I remember there was a humor novel he wrote that I think it was in the 90s. I can't remember the name, but I remember reading it. It was on this kind of subject matter, but it was done humorously. But I'll have to look it up though, because I'm just going by memory. But yeah, I think it's like we said at the start of the movie, it's Jeffrey Dahmer's favorite film. So, this is which I guess we should have talked about that. We should have probably addressed
the one thing you will agree with Jeffrey Dahmer about.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of like, I guess what it adds to the movie is if a serial killer likes it, this must be a fairly authentic portrayal of a serial killer, right? Like that would be the thing. That would be the only positive that you could really take from it getting a seal of approval.
There are certain endorsements you don't want.
Yeah. But that's the one positive one that I could kind of glean from that. But no, it's a really good movie, and I think it's I don't know. I think Joel covered it. It's just real. It's a really well crafted film too. So it has a very consistent look and feel, and it does a good job of pulling you in, and it's entertaining from beginning to end. I think, despite taking its time. So why don't we end it there, and we'll be back on with what is it? Demonic Toys
Demonic Toys, baby. Get ready for those evil toys, people.
Evil Toys. All right, so we'll be back on, and until then, we'll talk to you later.